Unfortunately, as everyone knows right now, it's a really difficult time to be in tech. But that being said, if I were trying to break into tech sales for the first time, or if I was considering making a move to a different tech company, these are the types of ways that I would evaluate if the product is recession-proof and well set up to survive and thrive over the next maybe 3 to 5 years. I do think it's important to mention that I do come from a fairly technical background. I've always sold engineering, software developer types of tools that are rather technical, so I do have kind of that unconscious bias around that vertical. But that being said, what I want to talk through could apply to any tool regardless of what vertical that it's in. I think strategically, if you're breaking in for the first time, again, unfortunately, we have to be realistic. One of the first things to go in a recession is sales, marketing, human resources types of headcount. And so again, it's not that you shouldn't necessarily go sell a sales tool, but I would be skeptical if you do have an offer, as an example, at a more technical product. That in of itself, selling to engineers right now is more defensible than trying to sell to sales teams, etc. So no perfect answer, but again, when we're looking through the lens of what is their product, I think it's important to ask, how critical is this product to their success? But also by extension, how easy is it to implement? So in your job, are you growing existing accounts or are you trying to land into new logos, new accounts for the first time? If you're trying to grow existing accounts, does the software that you're selling get licensed based on the number of users? Because it's going to be very difficult right now to grow headcount, as many people are unfortunately firing users of your software. So if you had previously sold 1,000 licenses to Salesforce, unfortunately now they're probably going to have less users when they come to renew this year. So that's one aspect to keep in mind. But on the flip side, if you are trying to break into new accounts, there's a few different ways that I would try and look at it, again, regardless of the specific vertical that you're in. So is the technology mission critical to the success of a company? Is it something that they have to use to have success on? Are you one of maybe 2 or 3 major players in the space? Because if so, what that means is at a minimum, you're gonna have a conversation at the table every time that a major company is looking to adopt a tool like yours. But I will say the flip side, and there's no perfect answer here, but whether you can network and talk to existing employees, whether you can read through case studies, try some way, somehow to find out more information about the product. What you also want to evaluate is how difficult is it to implement. And I say this from my own experience. Like in the past, I sold databases. A lot of what I sold was on top of a free open source product. And it's a great tool. But right now, a lot of people can get by with the open source and are not willing to invest in that upgrade. Now, by extension, the current company that I work at is a great and central tool to an IT team's organizational structure, etc. But by extension, it's also very easy to implement. When you're changing, let's say, if I have to go and find a new customer, yes, they have to adopt our tool, but it's very easy to plug and play and use. While some of our competitors do offer differentiated features that apply to a certain subset of users, oftentimes it's taking 6 to 12 months and it's more costly to even adopt that software in the first place. So these are the types of things, it may be difficult to understand all of this right away, but again, going back to if you're in these interviews with different tech companies, these are the types of questions you can ask. How long does it take users to adopt your software? How do you position from a pricing perspective, from a technology perspective to these 3 competitors, right? Do some research up front, understand who you're competing against. Also, when I'm looking at a product, whether it's in a sales, a technical vertical, a marketing vertical, ideally we can go into a market leader. A lot of times smaller players are consolidating right now into these bigger companies, but also, do you have case studies from prominent brands? The company that I work at is working with huge clients like Netflix, like Zoom, like other clients we don't even name publicly that are Fortune 500, Fortune 100 brands. 60% of the Fortune 100 is using the product that I sell. And so this is a huge leg up right now in recessionary times where teams are probably cutting wasted expenses on other tools that are not mission critical, and they're looking to consolidate and make their stack that much easier to use in the future, also reducing headcount. Now, that brings up another great point as well. If your product can reduce headcount, that's a potential way in. But even so, right now, it's not a huge investment that people are willing to make unless you're really able to extract meaningful business value. So I'll transition over to specific technology, but I do just want to do a quick recap there. If you're going into a role where you're maybe an account manager and the software that you're selling is based on the number of users as opposed to consumption, that might be a difficult thing to sell for the next 12 to 24 months as companies are reducing headcount and thus the users that would be using your software. Now on the flip side, if you're trying to break into new accounts, Are you at a market leader that has really strong and visible case studies with some of the top companies in the world? If not, it's not impossible, but that's going to put you in a great position to even have conversations. Are you in a space where your company is maybe one of 3 or 4 major players that are even considered at any time for your type of tool? And again, I don't like to divulge too much about my own personal job here, but that is the case where I'm at. There's really 2 to 3 to maybe 4 options when you're considering our tool versus other competitors in the space. Again, there's more, certainly, but there's really 3 or 4 at the end of the day at Fortune 500 companies that are actually being considered. From there, I'd also take a minute to think about how easy it is to implement. If you have a tool that a company could adopt and it would change the way they do things, that's great, but is it worth the increase in spend? Do they, after probably making some headcount cuts, even have the resources to make a major overhaul in their tech stack or in their tool set, even if it would change and drive a huge outcome? Do they realistically have the money and the resources available to even do that? Again, get in as many interviews as possible, but these are the types of questions you can ask. Who are the most prominent people you've worked with? How do you compare from a pricing, from a technology standpoint? Who are your 2 or 3 biggest competitors? Why are you losing deals to them? How long does it take for a company to successfully adopt your technology, right? And again, there's no one make or break answer, but that will give you a good sense how confident the employees are and how confident you should be that you're actually in a great position to succeed. Now, when it comes to specific technology, again, I'm gonna talk to my experience in more developer-centric, engineering-heavy tools. And there's no right or wrong answer, but again, certainly right now, as an example, I came up in the database space. I'm seeing a lot of database companies, especially these startups that were starting to achieve unicorn value, really start to struggle. And there's a few different reasons for it. One, a lot of them are grown on a free to premium model where they have an open source and free version. And now previously, where customers were willing to adopt the paid version, they had a little bit extra money, it made their lives a little bit more convenient. They're really asking themselves, can we get by on this free version, as an example? So all that to say, again, in the example of a database, I think it's a really difficult product to sell right now in the sense that if you're choosing a database technology, it's very difficult to migrate off of that to a new solution, even if it provides a ton of value. Is it going to be the number 1 priority? I really don't know. When I'm looking and thinking about the types of tech that I'd sell, right now I'm currently, to oversimplify, in a monitoring space that connects with almost every tool you can use in the cloud, on-premise, etc. And so there's a huge value in the sense that the tool that I sell is very flexible and can integrate with numerous types of tech and provide value to many different teams within an organization. And so if you're not at, as an example, AWS, Google Cloud, Microsoft, these huge companies of the world, do you have something that plays very well into that ecosystem? For example, for any of you that are maybe looking at cloud sales and haven't been in it before, a lot of companies now are moving towards this model where, as an example, they buy everything through the AWS marketplace. So your tool is listed as an option in AWS and it can sell with all of the other AWS products that an end user is using. And so if your product is well positioned within those marketplaces, it's commonly used with AWS, with Google Cloud tools, with Microsoft, etc. Or there's a really strong use case, as an example, where you're helping companies modernize from really old technology to new cloud native technology. That's a great place to consider breaking in. But again, database is lumped into that category. And so what is the least amount of friction for the greatest reward that you can find? And that's a difficult question to answer, certainly in the scope of this video. But as you're interviewing, again, let's say you're looking at a database company and you're looking at another different company. Well, if you're at a database company that's typically displacing older technology, that's great. And you might be well positioned long-term, maybe 3 to 5 years from now. But you really need to probe into the use case when you're interviewing with these managers, etc. Is a team really willing to spend and put all that effort into moving the database, which is just one component of a major tech stack right now, as opposed to focusing on other initiatives during the current economic climate? We've kind of talked about how being in the AWS ecosystem, as an example, would be a great place to be. Being at a market leader, even if it's not an Amazon or a Microsoft or a Google, etc., being at a market leader in your space is a great place to be. But lastly, let's kind of look at the startup space and how I would think about it. Everything is going towards Kubernetes, towards DevOps tools, towards intense developer tools, and there's so many different categories I could break in. But the thing that I would stress again is that if you're in that space, even if your specific opportunity doesn't work out, there are other startups selling highly technical Kubernetes native, cloud native, DevOps types of tools. These are terms you should research further. If you have experience selling at a company like that, there will be other startups, even if it doesn't work out in your first company, that will be interested in that experience because you're selling a very highly technical tool, which is difficult to sell in the first place. But I think, again, when we're looking at any given tool, yes, we want to look at minimal friction to even break into the account, but also, is there a path for growth? Again, I mentioned in the example of user-based licensing. If there's just a set number of users within any company that can use your technology, there's going to be a natural limit of what you can sell. But if the company that you're at has add-ons or other features in addition to their core product, which is their bread and butter, if you will, if they have different add-ons that can also charge by user, now you've still got a chance to grow the account, not only by adding users in the future, but adding specific features that the company provides. So my hope is that gives you a bit of a framework, and my call to action, if you've made it this far, is to comment below if you have questions. I could spend days talking about specific companies that are well positioned, etc. But candidly, if you're not looking in that highly technical vertical and you're looking at sales tech or marketing tech or whatever it might be, I'm not the best person to ask. So if you do have questions, feel free to let me know in the comments below. Again, that's the framework I would use when I'm evaluating what type of tech I would want to sell. There's no perfect answer, and it's on you to do your due diligence. Look for customer success stories or case studies on the website with incredibly prominent brands. How many competitors are there in your space? Can you figure out why you're beating those competitors on some of the case studies, etc.? There's a huge list of questions I would go through, but again, if you have that mindset going in, you'll be well positioned, especially if you have multiple offers to consider, of choosing the technology that is best positioned for 2023 for the next maybe 3 to 5 years and beyond. So appreciate your time, and we'll see you in our next video. Thanks.